When I was in Edinburgh last year, everyone, you got to go see St. Giles, and there's lions. It's the big famous church. And you walk in, and there's this old lady who's halfway to heaven at the front desk, and he just kind of nods at you. And it's a mausoleum, and there's a statue of John Knox, and I'm no John Knox fan, but I feel bad for the man who's he's buried under the parking lot in the back, and his statue's in the sanctuary, and he would turn in his grave at what the Church of Scotland's teaching nowadays. And then I walked down the road, and forgive me for not remembering the name of this place, but it's another like 500-year-old church just down the road. It's a Free Church of Scotland. And I walk in there, and not as ornate, not as beautiful, not as much money, obviously, as St. Giles, but I walk in, we're looking around, and this guy comes up to me, and he starts sharing the gospel with me. And then I look around, and I notice all the docents, all the volunteers are all sharing the gospel, talking to people.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so now I'm in a church.
Yeah, living church.
Yeah, that was a tomb. This is a church. So it's very sad. I mean, we're seeing in America, you see it all over, the GB, all over Europe, just these beautiful buildings, and they're like Christ said, they're full of dead men's bones. And I don't know how the situation is in Northern Ireland, but the rest in Great Britain, in America, is you have these all of the mainline evangelical denominations are dead or dying.
I would
it's
say
very, very sad.
Yeah, I've sort of perceived something similar. I mean, in Northern Ireland, I would say it's interesting because the Church of Ireland, which is the Anglican Church, seems to me to be kind of a social club a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like,
right.
I don't know. I'm not going to say that they're like not believers or anything, but it's like quite comfortable and not really. I think it's kind of like, okay, isn't it a nice time? Didn't we have a good time at church? Are we going to go to a meeting of the committee of the committee of forming committees? It's like The Office a little bit. It's like they have committees to plan parties and all. I guess that's kind of their thing. They have like little social gatherings. And then I remember when I visited Amsterdam recently. I found it kind of depressing because I think the two big churches in the city, from what I remember, at least the two that I walked past, had kind of been turned into like galleries event spaces.
Yeah,
and
the Nordic countries are really dark, man. I had a friend of mine lived and studied in Iceland for a year, and Iceland's full of churches, and he says there's only one of them that's still actually, because it's very sparsely populated, and he had the hardest time finding a church that was open, let alone a church that actually still taught the Bible, because there's no Christians there. The whole country's atheist. The Nordic countries are weird that way.
They're kind of fond of burning churches. There was that whole like black metal thing that kind of originated there, and everyone got in a little trouble. I think a lot of people were going around burning churches like under the influence of that music. That's at least what I remember. My more edgy friends at school were kind of into that sort of thing. But anyway, I don't know if that's a symptom or the cause, but it's probably a symptom.
You use a language like, the New Testament uses scripture, it talks about strongholds, right? Spiritual strongholds. And when the church, actually had a pair, they went out into the world and they planted strongholds and outposts like the Roman Empire did. They expanded, they plant outposts, they expand, they plant outposts. And that's what the church did, and that's what the Catholics were really good at doing. And then it's just like these outposts, they've died out. And the outpost is there, and people kind of show up and they hang out. It's a social club. And the enemy's taken over a lot of them. All over, Europe was the center of Western thought, of Western culture. And it's kind of, not to sound, not to be a jingoist or too much of a patriot here, but the Western thought kind of shifted. I think with the Enlightenment started the beginning of the end for the West. And it took hold of Europe most fiercely. And then in America, you had guys like Jonathan Edwards pushing back against it. And then you had the Pentecostal revival. You had the Jesus Freak movement in the U.S. But it's interesting, the last major worldwide revivals have all taken place in the States, not as much in Europe. And you go to Europe, and maybe this is just my experience, a lot of the places felt spiritually dark. And certainly that's not unique to there, because you'll go to Boston, some of the state's oldest cities, and you see the same thing. Beautiful, amazing, huge Episcopalian Methodists, all these churches, and they're gorgeous and they're dead. But Europe felt particularly dark to me because it felt like I was walking through. Every time I go, I feel like I'm walking through ruins of like a former Christian empire, and it feels dead. and it's
Yeah.
very sad. It's very sad. It's very scary.